Good day, my friends. Welcome once again to this channel where learning never stops. Please subscribe to join us in discovering more stories that shaped the world. And today, let us journey through one of the most significant and tragic events in human history, the Second World War. In our previous video, we learned how the First World War exploded in Europe and spread across the world. This time, we will uncover how another massive conflict began just 2 decades later, how it expanded, and how it changed humanity forever. World War II, also known as the Second World War, was a global conflict that involved almost every country on Earth. It began on September 1st, 1939, and ended on September 2nd, 1945, 6 years of intense, widespread destruction. More than 100 million people from over 30 nations took part in it. Entire cities were destroyed, millions of lives were lost, and the face of the world changed completely. The war divided nations into 2 powerful alliances. The Allies were led by Winston Churchill of Great Britain, Franklin D. Roosevelt of the United States, Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union, and Chiang Kai-shek of China. The Axis powers were led by Adolf Hitler of Germany, Emperor Hirohito of Japan, and Benito Mussolini of Italy. This war became the deadliest conflict in history. Around 70 to 85 million people perished. Soldiers, civilians, men, women, and children. Entire families disappeared in the bombings and massacres. The Soviet Union and China bore the heaviest casualties, losing tens of millions. The war was marked by genocide, such as the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews were murdered in Nazi death camps, along with millions of others considered undesirable by the Nazi regime. But before this nightmare began, the seeds of war had already been planted. After World War I, Germany was forced to accept full blame for the conflict through the Treaty of Versailles. The treaty demanded huge reparations and stripped Germany of territory and pride. The German economy collapsed. Inflation reached unbelievable levels. Ordinary people could not buy bread or fuel. Their government seemed powerless. From this despair, Adolf Hitler came forward and promised to revenge and change everything. Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in 1933 and quickly established a dictatorship. He banned opposition parties, silenced the press, and used fear and propaganda to control the population. Meanwhile, Italy was ruled by Benito Mussolini, who had founded the fascist movement earlier in the 1920s. Mussolini dreamed of restoring the Roman Empire's glory through conquest. In Japan, military leaders and nationalists took control, seeking to dominate Asia and the Pacific. By 1937, Japan invaded China, beginning the brutal Second Sino-Japanese War. Civilians were massacred and entire cities like Nanjing were destroyed. While Asia burned, Europe trembled once again. Hitler began defying the Treaty of Versailles. In 1936, he sent troops into the Rhineland, a region forbidden to Germany, and no one stopped him. In 1938, he took over Austria, claiming to unite all German-speaking people under one flag. Then he demanded the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia. Britain and France, desperate to avoid another war, agreed to let him take it through the Munich Agreement. They believed this would secure peace, but they were wrong. By early 1939, Hitler's ambitions grew bolder. He targeted Poland, claiming that ethnic Germans there were being oppressed. Britain and France promised to defend Poland if it was attacked. But Hitler had a plan. On August 23, 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union signed the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact. Publicly, they agreed not to attack each other, but secretly they planned to divide Poland between them. With his eastern flank secure, Hitler ordered his army to invade Poland. At dawn on September 1, 1939, German planes roared across the sky, bombing Polish cities, railways, and bridges. Tanks and troops followed, moving swiftly through the countryside in a new tactic called Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. It combined fast-moving armored divisions with coordinated airstrikes to crush the enemy before they could organize a defense. The Polish army fought bravely but was outmatched. On September 17th, the Soviet Union invaded from the east, sealing Poland's fate. Within weeks, the country was divided between the two invaders. In response, Britain and France declared war on Germany on September 3, 1939. The Second World War had officially begun. Soon, the conflict spread beyond Poland. German submarines or U-boats prowled the Atlantic, sinking British ships carrying vital supplies. Within months, more than 100 vessels were lost. Then, in April 1940, Germany invaded Denmark and Norway to secure access to the North Sea and iron from Sweden. In May, they launched their full attack on Western Europe. Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg fell quickly under the power of Blitzkrieg. France was next. German forces bypassed the heavily fortified Maginot Line by sweeping through the Ardennes forest. French and British troops were surrounded at Dunkirk, but through a massive evacuation known as Operation Dynamo, over 300,000 soldiers escaped across the English Channel. France surrendered in June 1940, leaving Britain to fight alone. Hitler then turned his attention to Great Britain. His goal was to invade the island through Operation Sea Lion. Before he could send his troops across the sea, he needed control of the skies. Thus began the Battle of Britain. From July to October 1940, German bombers attacked British cities daily. London was bombed every night, fires raged, and civilians took shelter in subway tunnels. Despite the terror, the British people refused to surrender. The Royal Air Force, flying Spitfires and Hurricanes, fought heroically and eventually defeated the Luftwaffe. Hitler called off his invasion. While Britain stood firm, Germany expanded its control in Europe. By 1941, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria had joined the Axis. German forces swept into Yugoslavia and Greece. But Hitler's biggest gamble was yet to come. On June 22, 1941, he broke his pact with Stalin and invaded the Soviet Union in Operation Barbarossa. 3 million German soldiers advanced across a 1,000-mile front. The attack caught the Soviets by surprise. Cities like Minsk and Kiev fell and millions of prisoners were taken. However, the invasion slowed as the vastness of Russia and the brutal winter took their toll. Temperatures dropped below -30 degrees Celsius, while German soldiers, poorly equipped for the cold, froze and starved. Meanwhile, Soviet forces regrouped and launched counterattacks, pushing the Germans back from Moscow. It became clear that Hitler had underestimated the Soviet Union's strength. In Asia, Japan continued its campaign of conquest. It occupied Southeast Asia, seized European colonies, and sought to dominate the Pacific. The United States opposed Japan's aggression and placed economic sanctions on oil and steel. Feeling threatened, Japan decided on a daring move. On December 7, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Over 300 Japanese planes struck without warning, sinking battleships and killing more than 2,300 Americans. The next day, the United States declared war on Japan. Soon after, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. The conflict had now truly become a world war. Shortly after the Pearl Harbor attack, Japan began its invasion of the Philippines, a U.S. territory before. Japanese forces landed in Luzon and Mindanao, overwhelming the defenders. Despite fierce resistance, the Allied troops were forced to retreat to the Bataan Peninsula and the island fortress of Corregidor. By April 1942, Bataan fell, and tens of thousands of prisoners were forced on a brutal march to prison camps. A tragedy later known as the Bataan Death March, the Japanese occupation of the Philippines began. While Japan expanded across the Pacific, the United States began striking back. In June 1942, the Battle of Midway became the turning point. Using intelligence to predict Japan's movements, US forces ambushed the Japanese fleet. In just a few hours, 4 Japanese aircraft carriers were destroyed. The once invincible Japanese Navy was dealt a fatal blow, shifting the balance of power in the Pacific. In North Africa, British and American forces clashed with the German Afrika Korps under General Erwin Rommel. The desert battles were intense, with tanks rolling through the sands and aircraft dueling in the skies. By 1943, the Allies achieved victory in North Africa and launched an invasion of Sicily and Italy. Mussolini's regime collapsed, and Italy surrendered, though German troops continued fighting there. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, the Battle of Stalingrad raged. From August 1942 to February 1943, the city became a hellish battlefield. Buildings were reduced to rubble. Every street and every room became a front line. The Soviet defenders refused to surrender, and as winter returned, the trapped German army was encircled and cut off from supplies. Over 300,000 German soldiers were killed or captured. The defeat at Stalingrad marked a turning point in the war, the beginning of the German retreat. By 1944, the Allies prepared for the liberation of Western Europe. On June 6, 1944, known as D-Day, Allied forces launched Operation Overlord, the largest seaborne invasion in history. In the early morning darkness, thousands of ships crossed the English Channel, carrying more than 150,000 soldiers. Under relentless enemy fire, they stormed the beaches of Normandy. The sands turned red as men fell, but the Allies pushed forward, securing a foothold in France. After weeks of fierce fighting, Paris was liberated in August 1944. That same year, another colossal battle erupted in the Pacific, the Battle of Leyte Gulf. It was the largest naval battle in history, involving over 200 ships. The U.S. Navy crushed the Japanese fleet, effectively destroying Japan's naval power. This battle opened the way for the liberation of the Philippines and signaled the beginning of Japan's downfall. As the Allies advanced from the west and the Soviets from the east, Germany was trapped. In December 1944, Hitler launched his final desperate counterattack in the Ardennes Forest, the Battle of the Bulge. It briefly pushed back Allied lines but ultimately failed. By early 1945, Allied bombers devastated German cities. On April 30, 1945, Hitler took his own life in his bunker. Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945, ending the war in Europe. But in the Pacific, the fight raged on. On the island of Iwo Jima, thousands of U.S. Marines fought against deeply entrenched Japanese defenders. The iconic image of soldiers raising the American flag on Mount Suribachi became a symbol of courage and sacrifice. But the victory came at a terrible cost. More than 20,000 Japanese and nearly 7,000 Americans died. Next came Okinawa, the last major battle of the war. Japanese forces turned the island into a fortress, and civilians were caught in the crossfire. Kamikaze pilots crashed their planes into Allied ships, and entire villages were destroyed. By the end of the battle, more than 200,000 people were dead. The world began to realize how deadly an invasion of Japan itself would be. Fearing an even greater loss of life, President Harry Truman authorized the use of a new and terrifying weapon, the atomic bomb. On August 6, 1945, the first bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, instantly killing over 100,000 people. 3 days later, a second bomb fell on Nagasaki. The destruction was beyond imagination, with cities reduced to ashes and survivors scarred for life. On September 2, 1945, Japan formally surrendered aboard the battleship USS Missouri, with General Douglas MacArthur representing the Allies. The Second World War had finally ended. The war left the world in ruins. Cities lay in ashes. Millions were homeless and starving. Yet from the destruction came a new beginning. The United Nations was established to maintain peace and prevent another global conflict. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, beginning a new era, the Cold War. World War II remains a reminder of the cost of hatred, greed, and unchecked power. It changed the course of history and shaped the world we live in today.